Okay, so today we're covering theories of personality, specifically focusing on the theory of Sigmund Freud. So what is personality? So personality is a distinctive and stable pattern of behaving, of thinking, of motivation and emotion, and this characterizes a person throughout life. We're focusing today particularly on what are called psychodynamic theories. So psychodynamic theories really emphasize the role of the unconscious. So remember, the unconscious is a level of consciousness that you're not really aware of, but it nonetheless influences your behavior, influences your thinking. And the person who is most closely associated with the psychodynamic perspective is Sigmund Freud. So let's talk about his theory of how personality develops. So Freud believed that personality has three parts. He calls this the tripartite theory of personality, or three-part theory of personality. So according to Freud, we have three competing forces that are operating below your level of conscious awareness, and there's this constant conflict going on among these different parts of the personality, and they ultimately influence behavior. So first, we have the id. The id operates according to what's called the pleasure principle. If it feels good, do it. It's a completely hedonistic or pleasure-seeking way of engaging with the world. The id is the most primitive part of your personality. You can think of the id as the little baby in your personality. I want it and I want it now. There's no reasoning with the id. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the superego. So the id operates according to the pleasure principle. If it feels good, do it. The superego says, no, we have to follow some kind of moral ideals. We have to have, some kind of conscience here. So the id and the ego, or the superego rather, are in conflict with each other. The id wants you to do things that feel good. The superego says, no, we need to follow some kind of moral standards. The ego then mediates between the id and the superego. It tries to satisfy both, tries to strike a balance. So let's take an example here. Let's say that you have a really big exam tomorrow in your psychology class, and your friend calls you, and your friend's like, hey, come over, we're going to have this amazing party, all these awesome people are going to be there, it's going to be so much fun, you're going to have such a good time. Your id says, yes, go to that party, you're going to have a great time, you're going to meet lots of fun people, it's going to be amazing. Your superego, though, says, no, you have an exam to study for. You need to do well in school so that you don't disappoint your entire family. Then the ego steps in, and the ego strikes a balance between those two things. So the ego might help you come up with a solution like, well, maybe I will study for 3 or 4 hours and then I'll go to the party. Or maybe I'll go to the party and then get up really early tomorrow morning and finish studying. So that is the three-part theory of personality. Freud believed also that we use things called defense mechanisms, basically to protect ourselves from anxiety. So this is like nervousness, fear, uncomfortable emotions, or from things that are scary, basically, from thoughts that are threatening. And we all use these in some way to deny reality, so to deny that things are even happening, but also to distort reality. So many different examples. These are just a sampling of particular defense mechanisms that people use. So first we have repression, where you block a painful emotion from your memory. So let's say that you have experienced abuse as a child. You might try to block the painful emotions that are associated with that experience of abuse through this process of repression. With displacement, You take your emotions and you transfer them onto some other object, usually something that's less threatening. So let's say that you have a really terrible day at work and you'd love to yell at your boss. But you can't yell at your boss, right? Or you might get fired. So instead, to take out your angry emotions, you come home and you kick your dog. Or you come home and you yell at your friends and your family. You are displacing your emotions, right? You're taking the emotion that you feel towards your boss and putting it onto your dog or putting it onto your friends and family because they're a safer target. With sublimation, you take unacceptable emotion, unacceptable impulses, and turn them into producing something, usually something that is beneficial to society. So you might take, let's say, feelings of anger or feelings of sadness and put them into creating a work of art. You might channel that energy into creating some kind of artistic work. With regression, you return to earlier behaviors. So this is basically going back in time, acting like you are younger than you are. So let's say that you know someone who, when this person doesn't get his own way, he starts to whine, even though this guy is clearly an adult. This person is acting like a small child. And then with denial, this is basically a refusal to admit that something unpleasant is happening. So you're basically trying to deny reality. Pleasure is derived from the mouth. So Freud believed if, let's say, someone is not meeting your needs, let's say you're hungry and no one's feeding you, you might develop an oral fixation where you're constantly putting things in your mouth. So you might be chewing gum all the time. You might be chewing on pens. You might be smoking cigarettes. So if we don't successfully resolve each stage, you become stuck in that stage and you can see the effects of it later on down the line. So let's talk about psychodynamic theory and the evaluation of it. So psychodynamic theory really helped to establish psychology as a discipline. So it definitely represents the historical roots of psychology. But the current thinking is that many people are very critical of Freud's theory, particularly because he did not apply sound scientific method principles. So for example, much of Freud's theory is based on his experience with a very, very small specific segment of the population. So Freud based his theories of psychosexual development basically on his experiences working with clients in Vienna. So he practiced in Austria and Vienna with Victorian women. And if you know anything about Victorian historical era, you know that female sexuality was very much suppressed. It was not something that was seen as proper for a woman to have any kind of sexual urges. And so that can help us kind of understand why Freud placed so much emphasis on sexuality and on the derivation of pleasure. Additionally, he had a very small sample size. His theory is based on his experiences with a very small number of individuals. So he used case study as his primary data collection instrument and essentially built his theory based on these small atypical examples.